All right, great. Welcome to the first of the 23-24 school year Northeast US Shelf LTR Data Jam Schoolyard Outreach Webinars. I'm Annette Brickley. I'm the Education Outreach Coordinator for our project, and our guest today is Mike O'Connor, who is a teacher at Waterford High School in Connecticut and is going to tell you about his experience going on our summer transit cruise this summer and kind of how he's sharing it and relating it to his students, and a little bit about how he ended up in this with this opportunity by participating in our data jam. And Mike, if you can go to the next slide, since you're driving today. I just want to point out that the LTER project, fondly known as the NES-LTER, is part of a whole network of research projects funded by the National Science Foundation, and our particular project is a collaboration between the 5 different institutions that you see listed down there on the bottom of the slide. And look, next slide. And without any further ado, I will pass it off to Mike to tell you about his experience on our summer Transx cruise this past summer. Go, Mike.
All right. So after I did Data Jam with my students, Annette reached out and said there was this opportunity to go on a research cruise. And I was excited and also potentially hesitant about it. I talked to Greg, the last teacher who went on, and he did a winter transect and talked about some of the less enjoyable aspects of it, and said, but overall great experience, and if I have the opportunity to do the summer one, that I ought to absolutely do it. So with that little bit of information, I went forward and said, yeah, I can do this. And I was thrilled to just be able to get out on the water and be part of the research experience. Wasn't sure what to expect. So maybe people who see this and are interested, I can give a little bit more background on what to expect and some of the benefits from doing it. So I'll hop right in here. Research cruise from August 5th to the 12th, and we were on the Endeavor, and this is her dock in Narragansett. And this is the mission of the LTR program. And so when I talked to Greg about the different roles there, I wasn't sure exactly the scope of the study until I said yes, and then started to get into what LTR was studying. Long-term ecological research, the name could cover tons and tons of things. And the real tie for all the researchers out there was the planktonic community, and everyone studying some aspect of it or something related to the planktonic community. So having taught marine science and oceanography for years, I love plankton, and have used planktonic data in the past from the data jam with my students, and do local plankton collecting, and we are part of a phytoplankton monitoring network run by NOAA. So I was really excited about plankton, and I think everyone should be, but if you're not, then you know what you're getting into. And so I did the data jam in 22-23 with my students. The kids enjoyed doing it. I don't know that we gave it the time and depth that we should have or could have, but it was great to be able to have kids try to express data in different ways, which is what we're always looking for, a way to understand data and then a way to share and communicate that data. And that's the same common theme that I saw in the the researchers that were out there. And so I wasn't sure exactly what part I could play in the research out there and what part that research could connect back to my kids. But as I was observing what was going on and helping, some of the things that I observed and my sort of take on it, I was really floored by one, the level of technological integration within the boat, two, the required knowledge and experience that everybody from the chief scientist to all the principal investigators to the marine techs had to have in terms of integrating that technology and navigating not only who can work that tech, and navigating the personnel around that, but being able to work collaboratively and schedule when that tech was testing when, and have the flexibility to, unforeseen circumstances, weather, and just schedule conflicts, all were dealt with in a really impressive collaborative manner where the thought process was out in the open for everybody to see. Heidi, the chief scientist, has credible ability to be able to include everybody and at the same time be instructing them on what her thought process is and how she's got there and why certain decisions are being made and what impact it might have on everybody's research. The organization, the prep work that went into it, all really impressed me to the point where, in class we use data, and we constantly are taking the conclusions from data and trying to get kids to understand the implication of those data, but we don't often take the time to talk about the process that's required to collect that data in the environment, the organization, the desires and changes of people's careers who might get to that point. So I thought while I was sitting there, and while I was jumping in on a bunch of things, one thing I could take away from it was that experience, is trying to get kids to understand the completely collaborative and integrated need and approach that a research mission has and the amount of prep that goes into it. And so I'll talk about that in a little bit, how I applied that to my class, but that was really my takeaways from it. And, the science is absolutely cool. Everybody doing different things, but all related to plankton. So we've got, they're studying chlorophyll through fluorescence, using the flow cytometer to actually get imagery of the plankton, and then the toe of the sled with the shadow cam on it. And I'll show some examples of that. So they gave me a 1 minute clip of this video where they're doing a tow behind the boat with a winch on the back of the boat, where this sled is equipped with, Heidi can maybe correct me, but there's a camera with a receiver, and it's basically getting shadows of all of the particles that are passing between that camera, and then eventually, hopefully, getting machine learning and AI to categorize those things. But at the same time, gathering physical and chemical data from instrumentation on the sled to be able to correlate that. And I was pretty amazed. I'll let the video play and let you watch some. I'm pretty amazed at, you think about the data collection for plankton, and you're doing discrete sampling of a planktonic sample and then applying that to the entire area that plankton net was drawn through, or you're taking a small sample and you're putting it through the flow cytometer and getting, a representative sample of what's out there, where this is getting every single particle that's passing between there and taking an image of it, and the amount of data and the potential learning from that was another thing that struck me from the cruise that was pretty incredible. I mean, this video probably has more data in it than, all of the data collected in oceanography in the first 100 years of oceanography in terms of data points there. So at least that one cruise with all of the data on it. So this was one source of data that was pretty impressive to me. The other is taking a look at the flow cytometer, which is where they're passing samples through and then getting actual photographic image of all of the particles in there, and then being able to categorize, there's a rhizoslinia in there and maybe eucampia. Having all the way from 2008 to up to whatever the current one was this fall, and being able to go back and say, all right, I want to take a look at this sample. And Heidi was telling me in her lab, they're working on having PhD students identify the samples, put them into the database, and then having a computer be able to run through and get a quantitative look at all of the different organisms that are out there, which kind of blows my mind at that ability. Now I got to get back to. Okay. Well, we'll go this way now, I guess. So, and then you can freeze that and grab some still images off of the video for student use. Going back to my classes, the one of the applications that I thought I would do is I've got a UConn oceanography class that I teach where the students do a year-long research project, and the data here was a potential that I put forward as potential source and a topic that kids could utilize to drive their year-long research. And, sad to say, Heidi, that nobody has taken me up on that, even despite having the samples that I brought back from the cruise and do a comparison to the digital resources here, or comparison to nearshore, which still may have them do. Most of them have chosen subjects that are closer to home for them, and I'll talk about that in a little bit too. So the other thing that I had never had experience with is just being on a research cruise. So I got a picture of the bunks here because that was my first question to Greg, like, what's the sleeping like? And the sleeping quarters are actually really nice. The bunks are long enough for a 6-foot guy to sleep in. And I put the schedule up here because basically, ideally, when they're working the schedule out, you and your roommate are on opposite shifts and working opposite times of day. So you may be up and in the lab and doing things for 12 hours while they sleep. If I don't know that anybody on there actually slept for 12 hours. Except for me, maybe, because Heidi was very nice to me and gave me the midday shift. So I never had any, I was working 9 to 9, which is pretty unheard of, as people are working midnight to 12 noon, or vice versa, or some people were 3 a.m. to 3 p.m. The schedule up there and the roommate, so the idea of sharing a bunk with somebody who is trying to get sleep as you're getting up changes your morning routine or your night routine a little bit to be, I haven't had a roommate that I wasn't married to for 30 years. So it's a thought and an experience that was pretty incredible.
So who was your roommate, Mike?
So my roommate was Bofu, and he was like the kindest and nicest guy that I could have ever roomed with. And I felt for him because I spent a lot of time. There was another thing that was was surprising to me was the lack of time that researchers actually spend out on the deck during a research cruise. The majority of the time is in the lab, and so while I was helping with a lot of the different things going on, I had a lot more flexibility to be helping
Mhm.
the techs and the deck crew in launching and retrieving equipment. So I tended to get my boots wet a lot, and wet boots after a couple days in a small bunk room really don't smell so great. So and Bofu never complained, and he was always chipper despite sleeping maybe 2 or 3 hours. And so yeah, it was a great experience.
Great. And were you on
And
the top bunk or
I've got a picture. I got a picture of Bofu in there. Sorry, what was the
I
question?
was gonna say, were you on the top bunk or the bottom bunk?
I was on the bottom bunk,
All right.
which again, ideal, and Bofu got there first and nicely took the top bunk.
All right. So you were on a watch with, just to cover some of the basics for those that don't know, you had a 12-hour watch,
Yep.
and um when you were on watch, you were with about how many other people on watch?
So at any time there were 6 to 7 people, and sometimes the entire 13, 14
Mhm.
people on the science crew.
And did
Um,
you have a particular job that you were always responsible at each station?
so I was connected to the the BongoNet team.
Okay.
So the plankton community is being looked at through chlorophyll. There was some sound study going on. They're looking at nutrients and physical parameters, and then there was physical collection of plankton, and then sorting that out on to size classes, and then partitioning that out to go to different labs for different studies. There was one that was going just for taxa to identify the different taxa groups in there. One was going for DNA analysis,
Mhm.
and then I
Maybe
forget
gut
what the
contents?
content possibly. I know that we were partitioning them out to like 4 or 5 different labs for different studies.
Yeah.
Um, and so we set bongo nets at whatever stations were on the list to do it, collect them, sift down, do a sample divider, and take that sample, sift it down, strain it down to whatever size, class, and amount that was required for each lab, partition that off. Were some of them were going to be preserved in formalin or formaldehyde, and some of them were just preserved in alcohol, depending on the different requirements of the lab. And so I got to, while doing that, get a great look at some of the zooplankton, at least, and found some pretty cool things in
I think
plankton samples.
you've got pictures, right,
I
coming up?
do, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't want to
So
distract you with your bunk.
no, that's all right. Yeah. So yeah, I'll get to that. But the this is the outdoor gear that constantly was going on and off with the helmets. And I put a picture of the galley in there because it's the most important thing on the boat. Um, and the food, I don't have it zoomed in there, but the food selection was incredible every day. There's a vegetarian or vegan selection every day, and the um, the the selection and the quality. Andy here is the cook, and is a talented cook. Worked in food service for years, and then came on the boat. And that was another thing that when I talk about the connection to the classroom, talk about all of the other jobs that you don't think about that are needed on a research cruise, and the interaction between the science crew and the boats crew, and how it has to work together. And this was my view most of the time, the porthole here out of the wet lab, and just a picture of some of the gear that was organized and stuffed everywhere on the boat. The transformation of the space in the lab and how every single inch of it is thought out and used well, and how everything gets specifically strapped down. It's pretty impressive, the organization to me. This was what I was doing. We were sorting out by size, and then separating those sizes down by smaller and smaller filter sizes. And got a lanternfish and a glass eel and a little hatchet fish, and a lobster larva here. So some pretty cool plankton samples that we got to see. We also dragged did I have the picture of it? Further along. So this is Bofu over here, and some of the craziness from the trip, where everybody has slept a few hours and is either getting to the point where they have either extremely tired or extremely silly, which Zoe always went on the extremely silly side, so got a picture of her in there. And my connection to the classroom. So I've got like I mentioned, an oceanography class that students are doing year-long research on. So their year-long research project, I can put that link in here after as well. But basically, they choose a topic that they care about, and most of them are choosing biological topics. When they sign up for the class, it's an honors level for college credit, and it's basically mirroring UConn's Intro to Oceanography class. So kids coming in, we try and make it as well known as possible that it is no true oceanography class, and that it's got physics, geology, chemistry, and the biology is integrated into all three of those, like it needs to be. But they want to do some marine bio. So most of the students choose a biological topic when they want to study something. So I've got a group on the left here that they want to do shark tagging. So I, in the past, will help them to organize and get all of that together. This year, I reflecting back on what I could take from the trip, said I need to bring to students some of the organizational level of a research trip. So I came up with a research cruise experience. So we are part of Project Oceanology, which Holly's also part of. And not every teacher is going to be able to do this and get out and do a cruise, but we get a set amount of cruises over the course of the year. So what I wanted to do was give over the boat for one of those cruises to my honors kids and have them come up with something for the day, whether it connects to their year-long research or whether it's just going to be a day research. So I came up with a sample chain of command for the day. So I took on the role of chief scientist, which makes me a little happy. The EC students are the principal investigators. So as principal investigators, they have to come up with proposals to me. And then we take all of the proposals, we take a look at the requirements in terms of time, staffing, equipment, see what we can and what we can't, and then try and schedule it. And we then reach out to Project O staff and coordinate with them and make sure, can we get 2 trawls in, 2 Peterson grabs? Can we have plankton samples from 2 different stations at 2 different depths? can we get there early? Because I've got a group that wants to do an Asian shore crab study, and we'll get them along the shore before we go out on the boat. So the roles and responsibilities, and then they have got to put together a research proposal where they've got a question to be asked, the purpose of the study, the benefit of the study, the equipment requests, staffing requests, the estimated time frame, and then is there any follow-up lab processing? So they have to include that, and then tasks to do on the boat, sampling log that they then edit to match their study, and then a basic research report. And if it does match their year-long research, then they're incorporating that data into their longer, bigger research paper. Get back over.
That's great, Mike. And you pulled that, I mean, the base, so I think when we talked in August after you'd come back, I mean, that idea for being able to organize students to do their own cruises really came out from what you had experienced and witnessed while on the Endeavor, as well as your other experiences with Project Oceanology.
Right, and it hit me that, you know, the research that was going on, you know, Data Jam takes that research and boils it down to usable for middle school and high school, and potentially some of my students could connect with some of the researchers and go further, but in terms of a more general application, this is what I came up with.
Yeah, no, I think this is, I mean, it's what, as you said early, it's what's behind the data and the effort that it takes. And I think it's really neat that you're hitting there's a potential for a lot of different interests from students, whether it's, you know, for some it's the science and the curiosity about what they're finding, but you're also going to pique the interest of students that are trying to figure out how the technology works to be able to do this, or to be able to design different elements that can collect the samples, and to, you know, what it takes just to organize people to be able to get something like this done. I think it's really excellent.
So like we've got a group that's interested in shark tagging, and we caught some dogfish and tagged them, and we've got a group that was interested in lobster shell rot, another one in fish biodiversity. So they're trawling and using rod and reel, and then here's our Asian shore crab study. And so to have them, the other part about it was I've got two different sections, and I've got, you know, 33 kids. And so some of them are working across sections. So to have a meeting to be able to coordinate that, it's kind of like, you know, a pre-cruise meeting where someone's on Zoom, or from another institution where they're connecting and trying to coordinate via long distance, which, you know, is obviously the case between Woods Hole and URI and probably most research cruises. And so I utilized that. And then the other part of the oceanography curriculum is, you know, an introduction to oceanography in general, into ocean research in general. So we go from the Challenger forward, and the other part of this cruise for me that kind of connected with my students is there were 4 men on the science team and 10 women. And the comparison between, you know, the Challenger, and we went all the way to, you know, Marie Tharp, and how she couldn't get, you know, any respect, and they didn't want to bring her on the cruise because she'd be bad luck. And so they, you know, they do comparisons between research then and research today. They have them do trading cards of marine researchers, and, you know, it goes across the gamut, but lots of women in there. Heidi didn't get in the deck this year, but maybe I'll change that for next year if I'm here. But she deserves it. So and I guess.
Yeah, I think that's what you
That's
have
it.
for
Right.
slides. So
Do you
yeah,
want to talk
well,
about the data jam?
are there any questions from our audience right now about Mike's experience?
I have a question.
Yeah, Ricky, go ahead.
It was so nice to hear you talk about this. You know, I remember seeing this idea forming on the cruise, and you're talking about maybe trying to create this like idea where the class is basically what we're doing, and it's really cool to see that it's more of a concrete idea now. Have you implemented it, and how
Yeah, so the
does it work?
pictures on that last slide was last week in our research cruise. So then we've had a couple days of follow-up data where one group was doing plankton analysis, another one they were sizing and doing gender for their different quadrants for the Asian shore crabs. And then those kids are studying the impact of Asian shore crabs. So they're going to set up an environment in here where they've got Asian shore crabs in one and a replicate one where there's no Asian shore crabs, and take a look at the impact on other organisms that they put in there. So yeah, it's worked and it's integrated into what I've done. And I think, it's our goal. So my district's goal for this year is students doing more and teachers doing less, which I'll wait and see if that comes to fruition or not. But staying on that theme, it is nice to have the kids see the structure that needs to go into that planning, be able to try and work it out, because they each are in different teams trying to do their studies, and I was not driving the bus. I'm letting them try and figure out, well, you guys need to do this. Can we do it over here? They're sitting with map of Long Island Sound in front of them. Then they'll ask me, like, how long would it take us to get there? So we're timing things out. And they came up with a to-do list beforehand once we've got a schedule. So it worked out well. Yeah.
That's great to hear. My biggest question was like, are the kids actually communicating? Because even every group project I've had through college is who's going to do what, and then eventually people drop out, and I'm sure there are faults, but it sounds like creating this like system of the more advanced students being more in charge, and you kind of having this like loose hand on everything seems like a good way to reach towards that teachers doing less.
There you go. I'm gonna keep that mantra going whenever anyone asks me to do anything. I'm like, sorry, teachers are doing less.
I also think that it's great that, Mike, that you had that opportunity to go out, because getting stuck in the classroom doesn't give us that real world sense of what's going on. And it's nice to actually be able to get out there and sort of get ourselves reinvigorated, and then bringing that back into the classroom is a great thing. Otherwise we get bored.
Right. Well, and just listening to Ricky, the conversations that I had with the people on board. So just the science crew, just for a second, you've got Heidi, who's incredible, and she's the chief scientist on this. And then everybody else on board was either a grad student, maybe postdoc. I don't know if anybody was postdoc. Heidi can correct me or not. But there weren't any other, researchers, or they're all researchers. There weren't any other professors on board. So to be able to have discussions with the next generation of researchers out there was really, really invigorating. And they're all working long hours, and they're all worn thin, but still pushing forward, and it's encouraging when we sit in a high school classroom and potentially are teaching about the need for change in a population that is resistant to doing a lot. It's good to see that the top students are making an impact in getting out there.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's, you know, this kind of opportunity, and even as, you know, it's the real connection and seeing the people behind doing the work that makes a difference and enables students to be able to start to see themselves in a similar position of like, oh, I never thought about, you know, I didn't realize that being an oceanographer that's studying plankton meant going to sea for 5 days at a time or more, or many times a year. And just different types of windows that you're opening up to kids by exposing them to these things. And then you have the awesome opportunity to actually take kids out on the boat.
We are lucky.
Is a pretty phenomenal thing. But you gotta look for those opportunities. I mean, that's, you know, you're open to looking for an opportunity like Project Oceanology where you can get the kids out.
Well, you
great.
look for it, you work to gather support for it, and then you've got to find the right district that is still going to stay in, and the right people in a district that are willing to stay in and pay for that opportunity.
Yeah.
Because that's the other part of the story, is none of this comes cheaply.
Right.
The research or our student experiences. We're talking a little different level of expense, but yeah, it's all relative.
Yeah. Well, this is great. And thanks so much, Mike, for sharing. And for those that are, I think everybody that's here, well, Holly can get filled in on Data Jam as a connection, but you know, this is just one of the things that that we try to do within the NES-LTER project is how can we bring the research that, you know, we're doing at this very top level to students, to teachers, to make it accessible. And so you see at the bottom of the screen there, able to sign up for just what we call our schoolyard, which is really putting yourself on a mailing list where I will send you an occasional email with opportunities, updates on what, if our team is out on a research cruise, if there have been publications of interesting papers and data, or something else going on with the Data Jam. I share it through that email list. And one of the things, since because we can take one teacher to see each time we go out, if there's bunk space, we bring the data to the students as much as we can so that anybody can access it. And that's what the Data Jam project is. And it's, you know, I guess actually if you go back one slide, Mike, just so it's there for the recording, one more slide back, I guess. It's a Google site. It has 18 different data sets that I've curated and made usable for students at 3 different levels. And it's a way for students to try their skills looking at data to see if they can tell a story based on the data set that they're looking at. Can they make a graph that has a pattern that they can recognize and tell some kind of a story? And the story part, is both a scientific story. What do they see? What are the patterns? But then also we encourage them to tell a creative story. How could they communicate to the general public so that anybody could understand the story they see? And that's the dance and tell stories part of it. So you can find out more about that on the site. But it's all these different things work together to get students exposed to real phenomenon, to real world data, to the research that's happening, and the coastal ecosystem that we may live next to or may not live next to, but certainly rely on. And I think that's really where we can wrap things up. And we are going to have another webinar from a teacher, hopefully in December, who has been doing Data Jam with her middle school students. She's done it with over 100 students each year and has a pretty good system for how to crank it through and organize students into doing projects. So that will be our next webinar coming up sometime in December, and later in January, February, I'm going to have an Ask a Scientist webinar so that we'll get one of our members of our research team to just talk about what their research questions are and how they go about collecting that data and working to answer their questions. So those will be to come. But other than that, if there are any other questions for Mike, we'll wrap things up and thank everybody so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks for attending. And Ricky, good to see you. Did you see my chat message? All
I
right.
did. I want to go. I remember you talking about it.
Yeah, we'd love to have you. So
Awesome. Consider me
we're
there.
just talking about a Marine Science Day that we run for elementary schools, and Ricky said that they do some of those events through URI. So I said, come on along, we'll set up a station for you.
That's great. Yeah, certainly connections are good to make. All right, I'm going to stop.
Well, thank you,
recording.
Annette.